Tribalism is broadly defined in neutral terms as the state or fact of being organized in tribes, social groups sharing common interests or attributes. The word tribe is often used in a positive way to describe supportive communities. Individuals from abusive environments are encouraged to find their tribe, to find others who, like them, reject abusive relationships. But tribalism's also taken on another meaning, referring, typically in a negative way, to behavior and attitudes that stem from strong loyalty to one's own social group. Group biases have been studied by social psychologists for decades. In the 1960s, researchers proposed two main explanations for group discrimination. They suggested it arose from pre-existing competition between groups, or as an irrational attempt to find emotional release by scapegoating others. But in the 1970s, Henri Tajfel found that neither of these causes were necessary. All it took to create discrimination was the act of dividing people into groups. He took 64 teenagers from the same school, divided them into two arbitrary groups, and asked them to assign monetary reward points to anonymous members of their own group and the other group. Awarding others instead of themselves took away direct self-interest. Not only did subjects assign more money to their own group than to the other group, they often maximized the difference in rewards, even if it meant their own group received less. For example, rather than give 15 points to an in-group member and 10 points to an out-group member, they might give 11 points to the in-group member and 1 to the out-group member. So, there was no self-interest, no meaningful group identity, and no pre-existing conflict. Being from the same school, there was a fair chance some anonymous out-group members might even be close friends, but the overriding instinct was loyalty to a random group. In his book, Moral Tribes, Joshua Green explores this tribalistic response in relation to the problem of cooperation. Green cites ecologist Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons problem, in which some self-interested herders raise livestock on a common pasture. To maximize their own profits, they continue to increase their livestock. Eventually, the pasture succumbs to overgrazing. The grass goes, the animals die, and the herders are left with nothing. Hardin's thought experiment illustrates how individuals who act only in their own best interests can all end up worse off. Green frames morality as a set of psychological adaptations that allow otherwise selfish individuals to reap the benefits of cooperation, aligning individual interests with group interests. He illustrates how a range of elements in our common human emotional apparatus encourages cooperative behavior. We feel empathy, gauging the experience of fellow group members, not just in some abstract way, but actively simulating their feelings and sensations in our own brains, from pain to pleasure. We feel loyalty towards fellow group members, inspiring us to help and defend them, sometimes at significant cost to ourselves. We feel guilt when we assert our own self-interest against the interests of fellow group members. On the flip side, we feel contempt for members who behave selfishly at the expense of others, like freeloaders who exploit the group's generosity without contributing. These and other reflex emotional reactions reinforce cooperative behaviors that lead to group benefits. Further reinforcement comes from concepts like reputation. As social creatures, we're highly attuned to information about trustworthiness. A trustworthy reputation can carry great social value in helping to forge cooperative relationships. And a reputation for consistently punishing transgressions against the group can discourage uncooperative behavior. When reputations are damaged, the concept of redemption allows people to repair them, opening a path back to the group and restoring the win-win of mutual cooperation. Tribalism arises from our attempts to distinguish cooperative strangers from non-cooperative strangers. To help make that distinction, we develop social indicators of shared values. Indicators like social rituals, language, clothes. We hunt for those indicators in others and adjust our behavior towards them accordingly. So, the same processes that facilitate cooperation between group members also create sharp divisions between members and non-members. This leads Green to an important qualification. Morality didn't evolve to promote universal cooperation. Our moral brains developed to align the individual with the group, but left us with the higher order problem of the group versus everyone else. We moved from me versus us to us versus them. Expanding on Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons, Green presents the tragedy of common sense morality. Instead of individual herders, we have individual groups, each with its own ideas about cooperation. Group 1 thinks land should be divided up into plots. Members have total freedom to use their plot how they want. Herders who prosper through hard work can purchase neighbouring land. Herders who are lazy or foolish, or who greedily overgraze, suffer the consequences alone, including death. Group 1 forms a council with minimal powers, simply ensuring property is respected and promises are honoured. Group 2 thinks the whole land should belong to everyone. Here, no individual prospers, but no individual is left to die. Group 2 forms a council with extensive powers, assigning and supervising all work for group members who have no autonomy. Hard workers are forced to share all proceeds with lazy workers. Both groups believe their own system represents common sense morality, while the other group's system is irrational and immoral. But their convictions about their moral values might not be as solid as they think. In 2003, social psychologist Jeffrey Cohen recruited liberal and conservative college students with strong opinions on welfare for a study in group influence. He presented them with one of two versions of a welfare policy. One provided generous benefits. The other offered slender, stringent benefits. Pilot tests confirmed predictions that liberals would prefer the generous version and conservatives would prefer the stringent one. In the actual experiment, when one of the policies was presented to a participant, half the time it was claimed to be supported by the Democrats, half the time it was claimed to be supported by the Republicans. So, half the time the policy and party support were politically consistent, but half the time they were politically conflicted. Cohen found that when they conflicted, participants showed a strong tribal bias, focusing on the party support rather than the content of the policy. Liberals strongly favoured conservative policies labelled Democrat over liberal policies labelled Republican, and conservatives strongly favoured liberal policies labelled Republican over conservative policies labelled Democrat. Subjects later denied being influenced by the party labels, although many of them believed other people would be influenced, especially their ideological adversaries. To know that group identity can effectively nullify group values in this way should give us serious pause. It means when we hear reasonable, useful, positive ideas from other groups, or unreasonable, corrupt ideas from our own group, we might be responding to them purely on the basis of their group origin instead of their content. This helps to explain how subjects from evolution to climate change are sometimes denounced or defended by individuals with no knowledge or understanding of the evidence, instead of being assessed on the data from the relevant scientific disciplines. Green notes, when false beliefs become tribal badges of honor, they're difficult to change. It's no longer just about teaching the facts, but about combating overbearing group influence. So, is there any way out of this tribalistic us versus them thinking? Finding common ground in the short term is clearly possible. In the face of a common enemy, many groups have managed to temporarily forget their differences. Alan Moore and David Gibbons' brilliant graphic novel Watchmen plays with the question of whether an ongoing common enemy could be artificially manufactured to bring about permanent peace between hostile groups. The novel is set in an alternative timeline during a nuclear standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, this time populated with superheroes. Retired superhero Adrian Veidt stages a hoax alien invasion on New York that devastates the city, creating a truce between the two earthly superpowers. The movie adaptation has a different twist. As the novel acknowledges, solutions based on deception hold big risks. Discovery of the subterfuge could destroy the truce. Uniting against a common enemy can just create tribalism on a larger scale, perpetuating all the same distorted thinking. Sometimes the common enemy might be a genuine malevolent threat, but sometimes we might be demonizing a group that just has different preferences. The group might be falsely labeled an enemy for political reasons. It's easy to become the monsters we think we're attacking. When targeted groups lash back in self-defense, we take it as proof of their aggressive nature. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. By looking for trouble, we create it. Uniting against a common enemy doesn't resolve our differences, it just puts them on ice. When the enemy is defeated, differences can resurface, and even turn a former ally into a new common enemy. Appealing to our common humanity feels more positive, but again, things can backfire if we try to sweep away our differences. Any unresolved issues we have about our differences can block our collective progress, and the most trivial seeming differences can arouse unexpected issues. When I studied psychological therapies at university, during a 2-day retreat exploring a range of personal differences, we were scored on our preference for planning, structure, and resolution versus improvisation, spontaneity, and open-endedness. The tutor arranged us in a giant U-shape according to our scores, with the highest scoring planner at one end and the highest scoring improviser at the other. Then invited us to form small groups with our nearest neighbours and discuss our preferences. It later emerged that in those private discussions, improvisers were labelled unnatural by planners, and planners were labelled unnatural by an improviser. These therapy students were trained in empathy, but on finding out other folks didn't share their preferences, they tried to pathologize and stigmatize them. Some valuable lessons were learned that day about appreciating differences. We're not all the same, and overcoming tribalism doesn't entail being the same. It's about finding enough common humanity to be able to hear each other and discuss our differences rationally. And let's be real, some folks have a vested interest in not finding common humanity. Leaders of high control groups, segregationist groups, doomsday groups who welcome Armageddon as the fulfillment of their faith. But finding common humanity doesn't require everyone's participation. It's a choice any individual can make at any time, including disillusioned members of separatist groups. Each person who makes that choice gets the chance to experience wider communication with people who might otherwise have been dismissed, deeper understanding from information that might otherwise have been distorted or censored, and greater personal autonomy from an enhanced awareness of our options. Establishing a common humanity means overcoming two distinct problems. One is the tribalistic wiring of our moral brains, which naturally favours in-group cooperation at the expense of intergroup cooperation. Another is the clash between the moral systems of different groups. Overcoming these problems involves effort and possibly some psychological discomfort, but every individual who overcomes them makes a difference. Regarding our tribalistic wiring, psychologists and neuroscientists have repeatedly described two different human thinking styles. A. David Reddish calls them Pavlovian and deliberative. Daniel Kahneman calls them System 1 and System 2, or fast and slow. Joshua Green refers to them as automatic and manual. They all capture the same idea. We have a reflexive style of thinking that's instinctive, effortless, emotional, and produces automatic responses. And we have a reflective style of thinking that's conscious, effortful, logical, and allows us to assess alternative responses. It's not that one thinking style is better than the other, they're just suited to different jobs. Green uses the analogy of automatic and manual camera settings. For everyday purposes, a camera's automatic mode will give good results. It's designed to cater to a range of common photographic conditions, but it has trouble outside those conditions. Photos come out under or overexposed, color balance suffers, images get blurred. To correct these errors, cameras have a manual mode, allowing us to adjust focus, shutter speed, and white balance. It takes more time, but produces much more accurate pictures. Likewise, in everyday conditions, our social brains tend to do a decent job in automatic mode, using a range of fixed emotional reflexes that encourage beneficial cooperation with fellow members. But outside those conditions, the limitations of our fixed reflexes become clear. We might falsely denounce some groups as immoral just because we find them strange, and our simplistic automatic thinking equates strange with wrong. Like a camera, we can move over to manual mode to correct our mistakes. We can widen our lens, take in and evaluate more complex information, and produce a clearer moral picture. If we find someone strange, instead of responding with reflex condemnation, we can ask ourselves, has this person done wrong? Has anyone been harmed? And we might reach a different conclusion. Our capacity for manual thinking gives us an extraordinary opportunity to move beyond the confines of our limited reflex instincts. Manual thinking is our ladder out of tribalism. Unfortunately, that ladder can turn into a hamster wheel, locking us into tribalism. This is the double-edged nature of manual, deliberative thinking. We can use it in a critical, detached way to scrutinize our moral instincts and correct our tribal prejudices. Or we can use it to try and invent elaborate justifications that confirm those prejudices. Unfortunately, a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance often pushes us towards the hamster wheel instead of the ladder. When we experience conflicting cognitions, beliefs, emotions, thoughts, we feel a discomfort that drives us to reduce that conflict and seek consistency. In seeking consistency, it's easier to invent fallacious reasons to confirm what we already believe, feel, and think than to do the tough mental work of questioning our assumptions. Take the earlier example of asking ourselves if anyone's been harmed by a person we find strange. If we can't find any evidence of injury or damage, we might twist the meaning of the word harm to prejudice the answer. We might say the person's strangeness violates nature. Even if the person's strangeness is observed throughout the natural world, we can still claim it wasn't intended for humans, only other animals. We might claim the person's strangeness defies the wishes of invisible supernatural entities called gods. We might suggest the person's strangeness offends the tribe's sensibilities. If we take the easy hamster wheel of self-justification, using our manual thinking to confirm our prejudices, we can fool ourselves that these accusations are valid. If we take the ladder, using our manual thinking to challenge our prejudices, we might notice none of these accusations identify any injury or damage. They're all just ways of confirming that strange means wrong, and they can all be arbitrarily applied to absolutely any activity people want to stigmatize. Folks who use these spurious tribal accusations might not appreciate that it's in their own best interest not to use them. In using them against other groups, they have no comeback when other groups accuse them of violating nature, defying other gods, or offending other sensibilities. Live by the fallacy, die by the fallacy. This is the second problem in establishing common humanity, the clash between the moral systems of different groups. Philosopher John Rawls' thought experiment, The Veil of Ignorance, invites us to construct a moral system while imagining we're just about to be born, with no knowledge of what our abilities, preferences, physical traits, or position in society will be. It's in our interest not to disadvantage any group, because we could be born into that group. The idea is that a fair system is one we'd happily be born into at random. In discussing morality with other groups, we could imagine a veil of membership. Here, the task is to explain our ideas on their own merits, without reference to the common sense notions of any specific group. Developing a common moral language means acknowledging that it's pointless constructing moral arguments in ways we wouldn't accept from others. If we're not persuaded by the supernatural threats and inducements of other groups, why expect them to be persuaded by ours? If we wouldn't accept authority-based moral declarations from the authorities of other groups, we can't expect others to accept authority-based moral declarations from us. If we wouldn't accept bald assertions about rights and responsibilities from other groups, we shouldn't make bald assertions about rights or responsibilities to them. When we're used to assuming the common-sense truth of our group's ideas, it can be jarring and illuminating to try to explain them from first principles, to move from automatic to manual thinking. Joshua Green cites the case of 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham, who tortured himself for years trying to find grounds to justify harsh punishments for homosexuality, which he called an abomination. But, working through the arguments against homosexuality in a detached way, he finally concluded it represented no harm or cause for public alarm, and argued for its decriminalization, catapulting him centuries ahead of the tribal common sense of his era. Detached manual thinking changes the freedoms we defend. Some people are surprised when an atheist defends religious freedom, when a Jew defends the freedom of expression of Holocaust deniers, when an ex-Muslim defends the freedom to wear hijabs, when a Muslim defends the freedom to draw the author of Islam, Muhammad. Superficially, they might seem to be working against their own interests, but they're just thinking on a human level instead of a tribal one. Detached manual thinking changes our loyalties. When we expand loyalty from tribal to human, concern for truth and justice can be aligned on all levels, individual, group, and human. When loyalty is tribal, the group is misaligned. The region of non-overlap could be labelled hypocrisy, where the group reserves special treatment for itself that it doesn't extend to other groups. We see tribal loyalty when groups who condemn child abuse shield molesters in their own ranks, and when fraudulent politicians are protected from the jail time any other citizen would serve. It's one law for us and another for them. Detached manual thinking changes our empathy. It's easy to feel empathy for members of our own groups, but to cross the us versus them divide, we need to be able to empathize with people outside our groups. Sometimes we hold back from that because we confuse empathizing with validating someone's viewpoint. Empathy is just about understanding why someone feels a particular way. Without understanding someone's position, communication is blocked. Some theists claim atheists just want to sin. They fail to understand not only that atheists can derive morality through secular principles, but that we have a very obvious moral motivation to enjoy the benefits of mutual support and cooperation. Some atheists claim all theists are mentally ill. Rather than arguing that theists hold flawed beliefs, they leap to a psychiatric explanation. We all hold flawed beliefs, and for various reasons. Sometimes we're mistaken. Sometimes we're deliberately deceived. Sometimes we're indoctrinated, which is how I became a theist. I required no psychiatric intervention. My indoctrination was broken by detached reflection. I started out on the hamster wheel of self-justification, trying to confirm my indoctrination, but I unwittingly ended up on the ladder to atheism. When we expand empathy beyond the tribal level to the human level, false judgments start to fall away. We start seeing the individuals behind the group label, and communication opens up. When we form groups, our social brains are wired to encourage cooperation and social cohesion within those groups. An unfortunate downside to that beneficial wiring is tribalism, leading us to elevate ourselves above other groups. But tribalism isn't inevitable. Our capacity for detached reflection offers a path out of it. It involves more effort than our everyday reflex thinking, and it can arouse discomfort when long-held ideas are challenged. But the benefit to our collective moral progress is clear. It's often said there's no I in team, but there is in tribe. And it's a great reminder not to be swallowed up by our groups, but to value and preserve individuality, integrity, and independent thought. To always feel able to question our groups and resist the errors of tribalism.